Huge news roundup today. There's some big game-changing bugs and interactions that we have to discuss, but also as well, the big story, yet another 222 role lock leak. This comes from the writer Yiska, who is a well-respected analyst in the Overwatch League scene, and he writes that multiple sources inside the Overwatch League have informed Upcomer, the website this was published, that the rumored 222 role lock will be implemented for Stage 4. They say it's not clear if it's going into the game at large. He goes on to explain that there was rumors and momentum towards speculation that the role lock would come during the anniversary event. Of course, I definitely thought that. I assume many others did as well. But then goes on to say, according to sources, the date for the eventual change had been delayed several times, culminating in the point where the league had to come out and say that they were not considering it for Stage 3 and they would consult teams before doing any of that kind of thing. According to Yiska, only in early June were the Overwatch League teams made aware that the rule change would come in for Stage 4 next month, starting July 26th. Yiska goes on to discuss this more on his podcast that you can find linked in the description, Tactical Crouch, and here's a key interpretation he has of the things he's been told.
How all these different time frames came together, I still can't quite piece together how all of that happened, but I think what happened, and this is not reporting, but this is me interpreting what I think might have happened, is that they were trying to get it out sooner, but it's really hard. And I understand, because new game systems would probably need to be created. We have questions, what happens to heroes like Brigade, like Roadhog in a 2-2 system, and I definitely feel them there, that it's a pretty big task.
All of this is incredibly interesting. Of course, we've talked about this ad nauseum on the channel, only to be disappointed when it didn't come out, but overall, I was always pretty confident that it was eventually coming, it just got delayed. If sources are to be believed, that is what's happening, and we should be getting it in Stage 4. Now, I would say there would be no reason to delay it in the Overwatch League, unless, of course, they were trying to work on it for a launch in sync with the main game. Why is that? Well, if they wanted to put 222 lock, that's already an option in custom games. Limit 2 role per team. Just click that on, boom, they're running 222 role lock tomorrow if they want. The only reason that they would have wanted to delay it is so that the big patch that's bringing all these features is with the same rule set as Overwatch League side by side. They didn't want to kill the momentum for that and any other host of changes that they're bringing through, because you have to imagine as well, there's probably going to be some significant balance changes to usher in this new role lock meta. I could go on forever talking about this, so I'll try to table some of this conversation for the latter half of the video, but I'll just say quickly that, for example, a hero like D.Va, who I've discussed earlier on the channel, I think was nerfed in the context of GOAT's meta for the pros, and surprising even to me, I think she's a much more difficult pick in a 222 now. If we thought a few patches ago when they buffed and nerfed everything in the game was a big patch, I think the next one might be even bigger. Do they just like revert everything that they've been doing to power creep the game in order to fit in all the different contexts that it's played? I'm not sure, but I'll tell you this, it sure is a lot more easy to balance based on the normalized role lock system. Jeff has already talked about this, reason because you always know what the limitations of selections are. Whereas if there's infinite permutations of a team comp, then you can stack components together that probably shouldn't be if we want to have a good play experience, you know, the GOATS comp, for example. Whereas when you put limitations in place, well, now the game's simplified in a way, and you can't have everything at once to build some overpowered comp, at least to the degree that certain heroes overshadow different roles. Because the crazy thing is, we're dealing in a meta right now in Ranked, where a character like Orisa is insane, but isn't played in the Overwatch League, which is sort of the inverse effect that D.Va has had, where they try to keep buffing Orisa to try to compete at the pro level, but really, was she ever going to be competitive as long as triple support was a pickable option? Probably not, unless you made her even more overpowered than she is now. That's a major problem. We've already seen last year in the Overwatch League, there was plenty of maps, and even the playoffs patch, Orisa was a mainstay, so we've seen what it looks like when Orisa is a top tier pick. But for the pro GOATS meta, her playstyle just simply wouldn't be applicable unless it was more broken than GOATS, which this entire process of continuously buffing things to try to compete with the other things that are really strong, that's the definition of what power creep is. and it's really got out of hand in Overwatch, but a role lock can come in and simplify that, so we can instead focus more on enjoying the individual playstyles heroes have, rather than seeing some exponential power spike when you start to combine 6 heroes together, especially something like tanks and supports that are naturally synergistic. I'll come back to this conversation at the other half of the video, but we've got some important news items to announce. On the live patch right now, Baptiste's ult is broken, where it's not amplifying any healing source even though it's supposed to. So for now, if you play that character, note that only damage is getting amped. This is a key aspect of Bap's kit that isn't working correctly, and the developers have said here on Reddit, Bill Warnecki says that they have a fix for this bug in testing and look to roll it out on the current patch with a bug fix. So it sort of would be more of a hot fix rather than the next PTR. So they're trying to slide it in between. And this was a day ago, so this could happen at any point. Also important, wanted to give a shout out to Fitzyhere. Nice guy. Got the chance to meet him last year at BlizzCon. And in the most recent patch on the live game now, which changed how Sombra's translocator worked, he went ahead and tested the full extent of the cleanse mechanic that it now has. The patch notes read that it definitely cleansed Ana's anti-nade, similar to how Tracer's recall works, but it also works for Mei's freeze, and you didn't test this, but I assume like Torb's molten core, so that aspect of Sombra gets a buff. But also there is a buff to the interaction of hack, where now Roadhog's hook can be interrupted if you land the hack as it's attaching or during the animation. The other major change was to the translocator sliding off of surfaces. Now personally, I think this is a nerf, because I've seen tons of pro Sombra players hide their translocator on top of rooftops that are inaccessible to basically anyone on the enemy team. Now they're going to slide off. Now, in some cases, that's a buff where perhaps you wanted to get your translocator over a roof and you didn't want it to get stuck, but an important change nonetheless. Also, Blizzard just added subtitles to the PTR, which is definitely a great thing, but it also might be able to buff your interaction with responding to ultimates. For example, here on Twitter, Andy shows that as a Zenyatta player, you'll be able to more clearly and distinctly get a cue when Sombra uses her EMP, because she lets out a voice line as she comes out of stealth. Maybe that's something they can change anyway, so this might not be a big deal, but you can imagine that at high levels of play, perhaps getting this text to pop in would be yet another indicator for you to go off of to quickly respond to what the enemy is doing. Okay, that's it for the important news items from the week. Now I want to get back into talking about role lock. Now on Twitter today, I've had a lot of discussions looking into people's opinions on whether this is a good thing for the Overwatch League or not, and what the ramifications for the teams involved may be. And in my opinion, the reason why I'm down for this coming, even if it is late and it should have just been put in for Stage 3, is because I think I, and many people, do not see the GOATS meta as something that should be recognized as a legitimate era of Overwatch gameplay. In fact, I feel like we all should be calling it a cheese comp that somehow just became the best comp and therefore meta. So yes, while there is a problem with the competitive integrity of changing up the entire state of the game near the end of the season, making 3/4 of the stage somewhat irrelevant, or at least misleading to who the best teams should be based on their records, I say we gotta rip that band-aid off. It's gonna hurt, sure, but to me that's a far better outcome than going to the grand finals and seeing a GOATS mirror, especially if we already have 2-2-2 in the main game. No, it's all gotta happen at once. We all need to be playing the same game yesterday. So whereas, yes, this definitely sucks for the teams that were by far and away the best 3-3 teams in the league, like Vancouver or San Francisco Shock especially, but if analysts are to be believed, these teams shouldn't really struggle in a DPS meta. And first of all, why do I even have to make a distinction of DPS meta? Shouldn't it just be an Overwatch meta that includes all of the Overwatch classes in them? The sooner we go away with legitimizing tank comps as something that should be in Overwatch, I think the better. All classes should have a role to play in the game. That's what I want to see. Now, I personally think a team like Vancouver Titans is probably going to take one of the biggest drops down, and they're already starting to feel that in Stage 3 with a lot of teams trying out different comps anyway. Almost no analyst I follow agrees with me about my reluctance to hop on board the San Francisco Shock hype train. Personally, I've yet to really been shown that Super is a dominant tank outside of Reinhardt, or that their long list of DPS players have the peak performance to compete up against the other teams that have insanely high peak performance players. Yes, they have a lot of talent and skill, can play all the heroes, but like, for example, who's their Widowmaker star? A hero that I think is going to be absolutely crucial going into a 2-2-2 meta. Remember last year? A lot of it can be boiled down to, does your DPS duel theirs? And yes, there's all the teamwork around setting that up, so it's not just pure aim, but we're going back to a world where you can actually go full Carpe and turn a team fight winnable when it shouldn't have been. With that being said, I think NYXL sees the biggest buff from this, where their passive discipline style forces you to go at them with hitting shots in an FPS game rather than the brawl-tastic flurry of particle effects and chaos in the Goat's Mirror. We may see a world where NYXL is the best team again. But regardless of the top three, I think the important thing to look at is the league overall on the whole. Something that's really annoyed me with Overwatch League Season 2 is that a lot of analysts try to make it seem like the bottom 17 teams in the league, or at least most of them, are practically interchangeable. Why? Well, the results look that way. It looks like the whole league is full of parity. Like any team outside of the dominant ones could beat each other on any given day. However, in my opinion, what this actually shows is how illegitimate GOATS is as a concept. Sure, if you're one of the best teams in the league, you can dominantly get away from the pack, and that's nice to see, but everybody else that's bringing up the rear, being interchangeable, is not a good thing, and is precisely due to a big percentage of GOAT's gameplay is basically guaranteed. It's pretty much only cooldown management and pressing Q with your teammate at the right time. And with that being the case, the rest of the league is sort of just in with the pack, where they're all kind of somewhat getting better at these very basic aspects of 3-3 and randomly looking like they're leapfrogging each other, when in reality they're just all kind of trading positions running in a circle. Whereas, if I take you back to last year, there was big blowouts all the time. The better teams destroyed the worst teams because skill actually mattered back then, which is what I think should exist in a sport. The game shouldn't be dumbed down to a point where if we just practice and harness our Care Bear power of friendship, we can eventually get this to work. No, this is supposed to be an FPS game where, sure, strategy is supposed to go a very long way, but there always will be times where Jonak or Pine just kills your entire team with raw mechanics. And that kind of play is just non-existent in GOATS. Apparently, there's a lot of people who really like that, but I don't. I think the skill gap should be ever present to the point where you can dominate your opponent if you're just better. And I think with the rollout coming through, we're going to see very distinct separations again between the different tiers of teams. It's no longer going to be top three and then everybody else, basically. Again, we're going to see teams that don't have the star talent on a key role for the meta have a really hard time. But thankfully, I think most of the teams didn't expect 3-3 to last this long, so there is a ton of sick DPS players in the Overwatch League right now riding the bench. And that's my final point to 3-3 being completely illegitimate anyway, is that we have an entire class of player that has been deemed irrelevant based on the meta of the game, yet they're the most exciting and talented. So from where I'm sitting, I don't want to see this go on a day further. If they put it in tomorrow, I would be happy. And I think if you've been watching the stage 3 games where more DPS is getting played, you'd have to agree. It's just simply better gameplay. And more importantly, it's more akin to what we play on ladder. And ultimately, the only way that they're going to get both to look the same. Because as I said earlier, going down the balance route hasn't worked. It's just power creeped the game in two different directions, where pro play and ranked play get more and more separate over time, whereas this at least can unify them, bring us roll queue, allow for the balancing to be less severe. All good news all around, in my opinion. So I'm excited to see this come through. You guys know that. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. But that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you did, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out. Lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for your Overwatch. See you guys next time.